When I wrote the ebook about scaling recipes up and down, I realized that this is an exercise that I do every day. I'm constantly scaling recipes up and down, constantly tweaking them, batch sizes, swapping cake pans, and that sort of thing. But not everybody's very familiar with that math. And even though I laid it all out in the book, I decided it would be super helpful for people if I also created a calculator of sorts. And so that's how the companion workbook was born. It's really a series of spreadsheets, a set of spreadsheets to accompany the ebook, and it really gives you a tangible way of doing the math, and it guides you through that process again, just like the ebook. So when you go to purchase the ebook, you have the option of bundling it with the calculator. And the calculator is a set of spreadsheets. It's a workbook in Google Sheets, and it will open up a series of tabs that will allow you to do the calculations of calculating pan volumes, calculating conversion factors, and applying that to your recipes. If you purchased the pan volume and recipe scaling calculator, that workbook, or if you purchase the bundle that is the pan volume calculator and the ebook, you will be sent a PDF that looks just like this, what you see on your screen. And that PDF contains a button that will allow you to access the template that is the template of the workbook. So to use the workbook, you need to click the button. And when you click the button, you are directed to a Google Sheet template. And as per the first line of the instructions, to use this workbook, do this first. Click the Use Template button in the top right corner. So we're going to click that button, Use Template. Now it's opened up a copy of that workbook with many tabs, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. The first tab that opens is the instruction page that will indicate how to use the spreadsheet, including instructions for downloading, file, make a copy if you want to make a copy, or download as a Microsoft Excel file. You have options. Making a copy will save a copy to Google Drive, while downloading will save a copy to your computer as a Microsoft Excel file. Both are options. The instructions are hyperlinked, so you could click one of these and go straight to the sheet you want from the instructions to the worksheet. But for now, let's just keep exploring the tabs. So after the instructions, there's a copyright page, just to say, please don't duplicate this spreadsheet to sell to others. If you want to share the spreadsheet with your friends, for example, ask them to purchase a copy. Now, the third tab is where we get to the good stuff, the pan volume and conversion factor calculator. Now, when that tab opens up, you're going to see lots of instructions at the top. I encourage you to read through them, but since I'm already familiar with the spreadsheets, we're going to just start straight, go through and calculate some volumes with the spreadsheet. So let's say we wanted to calculate the volume of a 6-inch cake pan with 2-inch sides. So our cake pan has straight edges. So we're calculating the volume of a round pan with straight edges. So we go to this first box here, this table, and we input the diameter. As I said, it was 6 inches. And we know our height is 2 inches because usually straight edge pans have 2-inch heights. You should check that though. And we input our unit of measure, which is inches. Make sure to select which one you want because there is some math involved with converting these units. Anyways, once we've inputted our dimensions, the spreadsheet will calculate the radius of the pan as well as the volume in milliliters, cups, and liters. It did all that work for you, and all you had to do was know the dimensions. Those numbers don't really matter for the purpose of this exercise, but you can see that you input your diameter and the height of your pan into the corresponding box. Now you need to know if your pan has straight edges or sloped edges. You need to know if you're using a square pan with straight edges or a square pan with sloped edges or a rectangular pan. And you basically input the dimensions into the corresponding boxes. Now, let's say we were baking a recipe that started with a 6-inch cake pan as we've inputted here, and let's say we wanted to go from a 6-inch cake with straight edges to a 9-inch cake pan with straight edges. So then pan 1, we've already inputted it. Now we go to the second part of the spreadsheet, pan 2. We want to bake a 9-inch cake with 2-inch sides, and again, make sure to choose your unit because we're using inches. Once again, the spreadsheet has calculated the radius and the volume in milliliters, cups, and liters. Now, when you want to scale up a recipe to go from a 6-inch to a 9-inch cake pan, you need a conversion factor in order to do all that math. So that's where we go. We scroll down to the bottom of the spreadsheet and we have a conversion factor calculator where we have to input the types of pans we're using. So our first pan was a round pan with straight sides. That's correct. Our second pan is another round pan with straight sides. So change that in the drop-down menu, and it calculates a conversion factor for us. So a conversion factor is 2.25 for going from a 6-inch cake pan to a 9-inch cake pan. So that means we have to multiply all the ingredients of our recipe by 2.25. Now you can do that in a notebook by hand with a calculator. You can create your own spreadsheet if you want, but if you've purchased this workbook, it will do it for you. That math will be done for you if you select the tab that is Recipe Scaling Calculator tab. So when you click that tab, it opens up a bunch of instructions. Again, I encourage you to read through them because I've done the work of trying to explain to you how to use the spreadsheet. But I know how to use the spreadsheet, so we're going to skip that part. You basically need to know a conversion factor. We calculated it, which is 2.25 in our case. Now it could be 2 or 3 if you want to double or triple a recipe. It could be 0.5 if you want to halve a recipe and divide a recipe by 2. It's really up to you. You can enter any number here, but we've calculated a conversion factor, so let's use it. Now we need to enter our recipe. We need to transcribe the ingredients and the quantities in the table at the bottom of the page. So let's say I'm making a banana cake. I'm just going to invent a banana cake from memory. So let's say my banana cake, my original recipe has 115 grams of butter, has 200 grams of sugar. And you can see as I'm inputting quantities of ingredients, the calculator is doing the work of multiplying by that conversion factor we typed into the pink box. So let's continue down. Let's say we have enough sugar there, but let's say we have 2 eggs in our original recipe. We need 4.5 in our final recipe. That revised recipe calls for 4.5 eggs, 4.5 eggs. Let's say we have 1 teaspoon of vanilla in our original recipe. We need 2.25 teaspoons. Let's say we had 2 cups or 250 grams of flour. We'll need 562.5. Let's say we had 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And let's say for the salt, we need a 1/2 teaspoon. Let's say you have a fraction that is a 1/2 or a 3/4. To input that into this cell here, you would need the formula equals 1/2 for a 1/2, or it could be 1 or equals 3/4 if you have 3/4. Let's do a 1/2 teaspoon salt. And you can see when I inputted equals 1/2, it converted that to a decimal, and then it multiplied by 2.25 to give us the new quantity. Of course, we want chocolate chips. And I said we were making a banana cake, but you'll notice that in this ingredient list, there are no bananas. But you can type that in. You can change any of these names. So let's put mashed banana, 350 grams, 787.5 grams. So that's great. So once we've inputted our quantities and our units of measure, the calculator has done that math for us and revised our recipe. So now we know exactly what we have to weigh out or measure to make our scaled up version of that banana cake. Now, when you're faced with these numbers, you'll notice there's a lot of decimals. Your kitchen scale might not display gram weights and decimals with decimals. For example, my kitchen scale absolutely does not, and it does not weigh anything below 10 grams. So you might have to play with the numbers a little bit, rounding them up. In this case, I mean, if you weigh out 259 grams versus 258.75 grams of butter, the difference is 0.25 grams out of 258 grams. That is such a tiny, tiny amount. It will have zero impact on your recipe. Rounding up here is fine. When you go lower, 1.125 teaspoons of salt, you have to be careful. You might want to round up, you might want to round down. You might have to do some playing with the numbers to make it work with the measuring spoons you have within reason. Just remember, when you're doing something like salt, if something's too salty, you can't fix that really. And with baking powder and baking soda, if you add too much of these ingredients, you could cause excessive bubbles, excessive brownies, cake collapse, some weird doming effects you could see. You really have to be careful with some of the ingredients like the chemical leaveners when you're scaling up and down a recipe. Just, be smart about how you round those numbers. In the ebook, I have a section about dealing with decimals and fractions and how to play with those numbers and the best ways of dealing with them. So I highly encourage you to read that section if you're faced with these decimals and you don't know what to do with them. Now, let's say we aren't scaling up a cake recipe that's dependent on pans. Let's say we want to modify a batch size, like for cookies. Let's say we have a recipe for 72 cookies and we only want to make 20. So that's where we go to this conversion factor calculator tab. In this conversion factor calculator tab, you'll see, of course, there's instructions again, but basically what you have to do is input your batch size. We're starting with a recipe that makes 72 cookies, and we only want to make 20. Our conversion factor is 0.28. That means that is the number we need to input in our recipe scaling calculator up here in order to scale down our cookie recipe. Of course, we'd have to change what's written below here, but you get the point. Now, let's say you had that pan conversion chart that I had from last year, and you already had the pan volumes, so you don't need to use the pan volume calculator if you already know the volumes. So let's say you want to go from a 10-cup bundt cake recipe, and so baked in a 10-cup bundt pan, and you want to make one muffin, which is 1 cup. Your original pan size or the volume was 10 cups, and you're going to go to a 1-cup volume. Your conversion factor is 0.1 or 10%. You have to make 10% of your banana cake recipe in order to fill just 1 muffin cup instead of an entire bundt pan. Now let's say we entered that conversion factor here just to do that math and see. Great. So the calculator has done the math for you, and it has scaled down your recipe for your banana cake. Now here again, you have to be careful with those decimals. We're seeing things when we scale down, like we need 0.2 of an egg. What is 0.2 of an egg? That's 20%. An egg is 50 grams, so 20% of 50 grams is 10 grams. You could actually weigh that out. Refer back to the ebook on how to split an egg and how to weigh out a portion of an egg. But it's going to get tricky with these small quantities: 0.1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 0.2 teaspoons of baking powder. We have to convert these decimals to fractions perhaps, and then find the closest measuring spoon and the closest volume. Again, in the ebook, I go through the steps to take, and I also have some charts of fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions to guide you with these numbers and what you can do. You know, 0.05 teaspoons of salt, I mean, that's basically a pinch. It's almost negligible, so I would just throw a pinch into your muffin recipe and you're going to be fine. But 0.1 of a teaspoon of vanilla, you could probably do a couple drops, or maybe an eighth of a teaspoon. 0.2 teaspoons of baking powder. Yeah, I mean, the numbers aren't perfect. You're gonna have to think a little when you do this math, but like at least the spreadsheet has done the calculations for you. Now, if you go back to the ebook and look at the charts I've laid out in there, you will be able to convert these numbers to measurements that are actually usable. I'm hoping with the instructions at the top of each of these tabs that you'll understand how to fill out each of these tables and each of these calculators so you can get the most out of this tool. Really, the goal was to make the math easier, and the more you practice, the better you'll get at scaling up and down, at using these spreadsheets, at calculating conversion factors, and modifying your recipes, and really you'll become more flexible with these tools when you're baking. Good luck!